When God created man, he instituted an expansive multiplication of humans when he said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." Genesis 1 verse 28. Many centuries have passed and humanity has continued to enjoy this self-sustaining procedure instituted by God. Then the unthinkable happened. A sect of people began to promote an agenda that the world was becoming overpopulated, insisting that the skyrocketing population of the world was the main reason for the economic, social, and weather upheavals being experienced globally. While the world may have been skewed and organized in a certain way over the years, it has been the lifelong project of these individuals to systematically control and reduce the population of the world. Their quest for this domination and ultimate reduction has been fostered through different covert means that have unconsciously thought to be occurrences necessitated by nature and human interactions. But the COVID fiasco of 2020 opened a can of worms on these different evil strategies that can best be termed the depopulation agenda.
The knowledge of God says that men should multiply in the earth. He knows that the earth will not be full of men to such proportions that the earth cannot sustain them. God is wise. He knows.
Population control, better known as depopulation, is the UN's tool to annihilate the majority of the masses so that no more than 500 million people are left on the face of the earth, a nick number, easy to control, dominate and subjugate.
Some have championed this cause of population reduction. They feel the problem of the world is population.
In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus, in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. Prince Philip.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Can't you guess?
Well, it could be on a spectrum from mass sterilisation to you know, greater availability of contraception. I don't know what your views are as to what can be done about it.
Well, I think it might be described as voluntary family limitation.
This evil is nothing new. It has been here for many, many centuries. The evil cohorts behind this agenda have hideously used different landmark events in our world to strategically foment their planned reduction of world population. While the world was made to perceive these events as orchestrated by natural forces, the uncovering of the evil plot of COVID and its offshoots have led to more defining evidence that there have been different strategies orchestrated to effectuate the age-long depopulation agenda.
They had planned the elimination, drastic depopulation of nations, reduction of population of nations. That was their plan.
It has become evident over the years that one of the main tools deployed by the perpetuators of these evils is fear. The instrumentality of fear was evident in the days of COVID, but this has always been the case with every disease and plague that this world has ever seen. So let's go memory lane to how several plagues and diseases that this world has seen has been deployed to achieve the depopulation agenda.
Fast depopulation through plagues and diseases. Take for instance the bubonic plague, the Black Death, that killed God knows how many millions of people across the world in the Middle Ages. What a delightful way to lose millions of people in one go. No bullets needed, no bombs. Just plagues. Another plague that turned out to be highly convenient was the Spanish flu. More people died of the Spanish flu than of bullets during the First World War. There are several very interesting things about the Spanish flu. First of all, it didn't start in Spain. Secondly, it wasn't a flu. There's more, but let's start with these two, shall we? If it didn't start in Spain, then where did it? In the US. If it wasn't a flu virus, What was it? It was a bacteria that caused severe and in most cases lethal pneumonia. According to a 2008 National Institute of Health paper, bacterial pneumonia was the killer in a minimum of 92.7% of the autopsies reviewed. So why do we call it the Spanish flu? As a decoy, a smokescreen to hide the truth. Why? Because the truth is so hideous. Most people prefer to hear a convenient lie. The first cases of bacterial pneumonia in 1918 traced back to a military base in Fort Riley, Kansas. Long story short, during the first half of 1918, an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine cultured in horses by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York, now the Rockefeller University, was injected into soldiers at Fort Riley. The so-called Spanish flu was a vaccine experiment gone horribly wrong. Well, that's what we, the people, would say. The cabal would refer to it differently. They would call it an experiment with the best outcome ever. Millions of American soldiers were vaccinated with this experimental serum. 2 million of them went overseas. They fought under poor sanitary conditions, so the bacteria spread like wildfire wherever they went. The story was then spread that these soldiers would come home with all sorts of European diseases, so the American population was vaccinated as well. On top of everything else, the vaccines were distributed all over Europe. Only the vaccinated died. Healthy men and women in the prime of their lives died, not the elderly, as would have been the case if it were a flu virus. Who was in charge of that distribution and mass vaccination program? The Rockefeller Institute. Who was the main scientist in charge? Dr. Frederick Gates. According to Gates, they injected random dosages of an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine into soldiers. Those who survived became cloud adults, meaning they spread the bacteria to others, even the non-vaccinated. In modern COVID days, we would call it shedding. The vaccinated infecting the non-vaccinated.
Before the advent of COVID, there had been other strategies alike that were orchestrated to actualize mass annihilation of people. The whole world thought wars, natural disasters, famine, drought, plagues and diseases were necessitated by natural forces. On the contrary, they were planned and organized to achieve massive extermination of human beings from the face of the earth. But how was this successfully executed? One of such evil strategies are the orchestration of so-called natural disasters.
These were disasters that caused the deaths of several people.
Think earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions and tsunamis. They don't need much explanation. The earth shakes, people die. But did you know that many of these natural disasters nowadays are actually caused by man? Ever heard of HAARP? High Frequency Active Aurora Research Program? An American military research program used to excite the ionosphere via high-frequency signals? Using it influences the weather in a profound way.
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning. In the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. For decades now, these governments governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes. All of them could be subject to weather modification.
Natural disasters can be and are triggered by the cabal to get rid of people. How convenient. Others are engaging even in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes and volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real.
You could actually spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a ugly tech fix.
You can spray something into the atmosphere to change.
Spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
How do you do this?
You'd start with a fleet of modified business jets and say 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year. And each year you have to put a little more. And this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in emissions.
We'll get to it eventually.
People are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions. We put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide. We're talking about 1% of that.
1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
What happens to the sulfuric acid after it's sprayed? Does it just stay up there?
No, it rains down, but it's a tiny addition to what we're already.
In effect, through acts of geoengineering, the so-called natural disasters that have plagued many nations of the world and had hitherto been attributed to natural forces, have been perpetrated for many years and have led to the deaths of millions.
In fact, I asked a question because, you know, when you talk about geoengineering, which is the deliberate large-scale technological, they say intervention, which is a diplomatic word for manipulation. So I would say it's the technological manipulation of an environmental process in the Earth's climate system.
Through these false technological interventions, which really are a manipulation of the Earth's climate system, these so-called natural disasters are further effectuated.
Chemtrails. Remember clear blue skies and white fluffy clouds? Neither do we. They disappeared several decades ago when all of a sudden planes left strange lines in the sky that remained there instead of disappearing after a few minutes, which would be normal for contrails, condensation trails. These new trails, however, not only remain in our skies, they spread out to form a thin and all-enveloping cloud cover. This new type of trails, often raggedy on one side, were soon coined chemtrails, chemical trails instead of condensation trails. Years of testing went by. Chemicals were found all right, and to an alarming extent. Barium, cadmium, aluminum, titanium, strontium, lithium, heavy metals that are stored in our brains where they have proven to cause Alzheimer and Parkinson disease. What on earth are they doing up there? People reported getting sick, having headaches, burning eyes, and feeling exhausted. After years of denial and ridicule by the authorities, chemtrails were finally admitted to exist. Not only that, we were told they were sprayed on us for our own good, to protect us from global warming.
Another example is the array of technologies often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat.
I gotta put this on YouTube. It's like it's spraying out of the top of his wings.
So I'm saying, is this a way of tackling climate change or effecting climate change?
Another item on the depopulation agenda is the creation of famine and drought, an inevitable result of the control and manipulation of the weather. These concocted famines lead to artificial food shortage. However, several other methods for inflicting hunger have been meted out on the nations. Ultimately, millions more have been wiped out of the Earth's populace through this evil work.
The evil things that it do on food production, they're working on food production, supply chains, the destroying supply chains. Now, these things are not happening by themselves. They're planned. They're planned. They're coming up with laws to make it difficult for farmers everywhere. Farmers are having difficulties in many countries. Laws and laws and laws prohibiting them from doing their work in the right way. A lot of farmers have been thrown into prison. And the whole thing is about creating an artificial shortage of food.
So me and my coworker got talking today, and something came up that I didn't really think about when my dad mentioned it to me. He's worked in the agriculture industry for over 40 years. This year, farmers are being offered 1.5 times the value of their crops to destroy them. They're also being told by the federal government they will not receive subsidies for farming if they refuse to destroy their crops. What does that mean? That means that the farmer cannot afford to provide you with food based upon the taxes the government is levying on him if the government doesn't in turn give him back his tax money to provide you with food. Kind of a f***ed up system, but that's how it works. And, well, they're not going to subsidize them if they don't destroy the crops. They'll pay them more than what it's worth, and they want them to destroy it, and they'll still get their subsidies. They're trying to create a food shortage.
So basically, what's happening is the Indian government, they have a plan to take over the food supply completely. What they're trying to do is the private companies just want to buy the entire grain and rice. So if entire grain and rice is bought by these private companies, they can easily store away and stop it from going into the public service. And that's where the main struggle is. We know these people who are buying these corporations, they have direct links to Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation, and they want to control the food supply and mass murder people. And they have openly said that's what they want to do. But if the food supply goes completely into their hands, they will starve you to death.
And so while they are causing the shortage of food, they're announcing to us that there's shortage. There's likely to be shortage. They think the world is not large enough for them because there are too many people that shouldn't be here. There are too many unqualified people. So they have to weed out all those that they think are not good enough, and then select those that are, in their opinion, the good stock.
After thousands of years, during which humans were the rulers of the world, authority and power will shift away from humans to computers, and most humans will become economically useless and politically powerless. Already today, we are beginning to see the creation of a new class of humans, the useless class. Just as the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century created the new working class, the proletariat, so now the artificial intelligence revolution is beginning to create the useless class.
An instrumental tool for the execution of this evil technological revolution is the 5G. Beyond the so-called exciting benefits of the 5G put forth by governments and organizations, are the dastardly deathly effects on human health and ultimately on the human population.
The 5G that is being set up is causing a lot of chaos in places where people are beginning to discover what it's all about. And one of the reasons, because some countries don't even know why they ask their people to hide. They don't even know. But one of the major reasons keeping people indoors is so they can set up the digital sites for the 5G. That's one of the reasons.
For the last few years, and especially during the COVID lockdowns, countless 5G masts and transmitters have been placed on buildings, on high voltage masts and streetlights. The unrolling takes place in a highly undemocratic way, mostly in the middle of the night. Citizens have no voice. Masts and transmitters can be placed on the roof of your building without your consent. No guarantees of safety and security have been given to the people who live in those buildings or in the direct vicinity. 5G is not a steady frequency. It is in development. Right now, most countries have 5G of 3.5 gigahertz. Not a big deal just yet, even though the effects on body and mind can already be felt, like we just showed. However, our governments have a plan for their 5G networks. They intend to increase the gigahertz from 3.5 to 28 to 60. 28 gigahertz is now at an experimental stage. 60 gigahertz is the near future. The entire Internet of Things, in which everything is interconnected through a wireless mega network, will be rolled out on 60 gigahertz. At exactly 60 gigahertz, the electrons of an oxygen atom start spinning. As a result, the oxygen you breathe in can no longer be absorbed by your blood cells. In other words, when 5G is set on 60 gigahertz and released, we will literally drop dead within minutes.
Wake up and ask yourself questions. Because one of the positive things you have is your population. Destroy that and you're done. Destroy it and you're done. With your population, you have potentials. They tell you your population is a problem. No, it's a potential. We can't be listening to people who are bereft of ideas, bereft of solutions.
While the globalists seek to perpetually perpetuate this nefarious depopulation agenda, it has become all the more pertinent to recognize this evil for what it truly is and dispel this deception, as we proliferate the nations with the eternal truth of God's word, until the earth is filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea,